Harry Perkins.
Part of this fiscal cliff we're driving rapidly towards is has been artificially constructed. The sequestration issue is an artifact, a political artifact that we can do away with tomorrow. So we don't have to do the automatic cuts. We can go back and sit down and do a reasonable look at what our spending has been and what we need to make rational cuts into the spending. In terms of the tax increases, we simply have not balanced our tax income with our expenditures, and there may be room to cut our expenditures, but the fact of the matter is our tax rates are at historic lows. We have not created jobs because of these low tax rates, and we need to raise the rates in order to pay for the things that we expect to do as a national government. $600 billion a year in national defense. Somebody's got to pay for that. All the other things that need to be paid for, we have to come to a reasonable an agreement on what needs to be paid for and how we're going to pay for it. I'm an advocate of pay-go. If you want a new program, figure out how you're going to pay for it. And I think if we take that approach to the fiscal cliff that we're allegedly driving towards here on December 31st, which is well before any of us would ever be in office, it's going to take serious people sitting down to solve these serious problems. I just don't see that in the current composition of Congress.
Scott Perry.
Well, first let me say that I reject the notion that if you're going to cut a tax, you have to figure out how you're going to pay for it. That notion portends that it's the government's money in the first place, and I don't believe it is the government's money in the first place. It's the citizens who earned it. But aside from that, budgeting is about setting priorities, which there has been a failure of leadership at all levels to do that. We need to set the priorities and tell the people that voted for us what we believe in and how much we think we should spend on it, and work that out. These across-the-board cuts, I don't see that as leadership. I see that as followership, and I don't see it as many people in the Obama administration, including the Secretary of Defense. They know that that's going to be detrimental to the security of this nation. And then you have all the other programs that are going to be cut alongside it for the sake of this thing known as sequestration. I've already proven that I can work across the aisle. I've worked across the aisle on many bipartisan issues. I've worked in concert with my own party and against my own party when I thought it was in the best interest to do so, and that's going to have to happen. What I think you're seeing here is a fundamental difference of philosophy, where one of us at least believes that we don't have an income problem in government, we have a spending problem, and that's where I'm at. I think we have a spending problem. We need to set priorities, explain those priorities, and then take action in that regard with the voters' approval.
Mike Offenberger.
We're also missing two big elephants in the room. The first being our government doesn't know how to stop spending money. So I think that we need to work towards a balanced budget amendment. And the ones that I've seen proposed are talking about decades or 15, 17 years down the road. It needs to be done as soon as possible. And the other one is our Federal Reserve Bank. Our Federal Reserve just constantly prints money, which destroys the value of our dollar. That's why our gas prices are so high now, the groceries are so high now. When your dollar is worthless, it costs you more to buy what you need to buy, and your salaries are not catching up with that. So we also need to look towards auditing the Federal Reserve and seeing the problems that it creates and ending the Federal Reserve.
Harry Perkinson, Scott Perry just said that he rejects the idea that before you can have a tax cut, you have to figure out a way to pay for it.
55% of our deficit can be directly attributed to the Bush tax cuts. If we had not had the Bush tax cuts take place, we would have had equal or greater job creation, and we would be 55% lower in debt over that time period. So there was if they wanted to make a tax cut, that's when they should have sat down and figured out what programs they were going to cut in order to pay for that tax cut. You can't just arbitrarily go in and cut taxes and then say, okay, figure out how you're going to pay for everything else.
Scott Perry, doesn't he have a point?
No, I don't think he does. I think the Reagan era and the expansion, the greatest economic expansion in modern history occurred because of lowering tax rates and broadening the base. And if you were around in the 80s, and I certainly was, life was pretty good. We pulled ourselves out of a very deep recession, and business was booming, and personal incomes were on the rise. This borrowing from yourself or some other country to spend on yourself and have government make all the decisions has been an obvious failure. That's why we have 23 million Americans unemployed. This has been 4 years of this now, and I don't see how anybody can point to it as any kind of success whatsoever.
You are listening to the debate of the candidates for the 4th Congressional District, brought to you by Williger and McAvoy Architects in Harrisburg. We will be back in a moment for the WHP 580 iHeartRadio Performance Studio, but first a break for traffic and weather and news on WHP. We're back with the debate. You're listening to the debate of the candidates for the 4th Congressional District, and a reminder, our debate is being streamed via audio and video. Simply go to WHP580.com and you can check it out, listen in, and watch it, or whatever. Here's Bill Meade. Well, what did they do? View.
Yeah.
Okay. Here's Bill Meade once again.
That sounds about right.
Yeah.
Okay. Harry Perkinson, before the break, Scott Perry was pointing to the 80s under Ronald Reagan as a time when tax cuts got the economy pumping and got business going again. And I saw you wanted to sort of respond to that, so go ahead.
I think that's an incorrect representation of what the history actually was. In 1981, there was a mild recession that was actually, we stimulated out of that by cutting interest rates. If you recall the Carter era, we were experiencing very high interest rates throughout the the economy. Mortgages were very high, whatever, and that was Volcker's attempt to tame inflation in the country. And what happened was, cutting those interest rates is what stimulated the economy. The tax cuts had very little effect on stimulation whatsoever. There's been studies that have proven this. It did do an income distribution, changed the income distribution, but had no effect on stimulating the economy.
Scott Perry.
I think it's just inversely. I think he's got it completely inverse. Interest rates are a function of market activity, and as market activity increases, interest rates rise because capital is more expensive, and it's inverse when the economy is in poor shape. If you remember the late 70s, the economy was in shambles. We were paying 17-20% rates, and people couldn't afford their homes, and people couldn't afford gas, and with energy crisis, people couldn't afford to leave the lights on. And to say that Chairman Volcker just unilaterally lowered the interest rates and spurred the economy, I think is delusional, quite honestly. Thank you.
Let me get Mike Koppenberger in.
Well, first of all, the economy runs in cycles. It doesn't matter which administration is in there, but there's two facets of this. One is interest rates, which is the Federal Reserve messing around with the economy, which is a big problem. It creates more problems than it helps. And the other one has to deal with the tax structure. If we're going to constantly play, the game of what about these tax cuts? Should we keep renewing these tax cuts? Let's just eliminate it and change the tax structure to one that actually works.
And Harry, going to wrap this up. But
Paul Volcker was set the prime interest rate, and the prime interest rate was set high, and then the market did the rest of the setting. The interest rates are not just a function of market; they're a function of risk. And right now, we have exceptionally low interest rates because there's low demand and very low risk with regard to using the money for investments.